So I would like to welcome Rachael Lammey from Crossref. It's a pleasure to have you today. Rachael holds a master's degree in English language and literature from University of St. Andrews. She also studied the Masters of Letters in Latin Magister Literatum at University of Stirling, and she worked for Taylor and Francis Books and Journals for 6 years before joining Crossref in 2012. At Crossref, she worked in product management before moving over to the member and community outreach team in 2006. She is currently the head of special programs, and she is well known at Crossref to be very kind. She presents, speaks, writes, organizes, travels, manages her cats. Rachael is based in Oxford in the UK, and she is today with us presenting the topic called Peer Review as Publications. So please welcome Rachael. Hello Rachael, how are you?
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. And Humberto, thank you for the introduction. I'm going to talk about peer review as publications, but I'll start by introducing you to Crossref. So I've worked for Crossref for 12 years, and our mission is to make research outputs easy to find, cite, link, assess, and reuse. And we do that by, because we're a not-for-profit membership organisation that aims to make scholarly communications better. So organisations join Crossref so that they can register DOIs and metadata with us, so that it helps the content be used and discovered in a standard way, no matter where in the world the content is being published and in what language. So I've been asked today to talk about peer reviews as publications and the trends that we've seen in this respect at Crossref. So back in 2017, we announced that we were going to start to accept the registration of peer reviews at Crossref. And as a membership organisation, we do this because our members wanted us to do so. And the reasons for this are multiple. In the same way that registering your content, so journal articles, books, conference proceedings with Crossref, you get a DOI for them. And the benefits of registering the preprints with us means that they're discoverable. So they're available in our metadata alongside all of the other content that's registered by our 12,000 members. They're citable, so you can cite a reference using the DOI. And they're also part of the formal scholarly record. If you do reviews, you know that you spend time and effort doing this, so it should be recognised as part of the contribution that you make to research. Other benefits, as I mentioned, it gives the reviewers credit for the work that's often unseen that they've done to check and vet the research. It gives a persistent link to those reviews so that you can come back and revisit those over time. It shows the provenance of the work. So you can see very easily the comments and the comments, the recommendations, suggestions, and potential issues that have been noted in the work by the referees and the editors, and potentially how the author has responded to those in revising their work. At Crossref, we make the metadata associated with publications and peer reviews and all other content types openly available. So it means that when organisations register peer reviews with us, people can find information on the reviews and potentially make comparisons across publishers. There's that history of results in terms of what happened with a published article. And it means that the citation record is clear and up to date if you do want to reference a review or maybe a decision letter in your own work. So in summary, it makes reviews discoverable, citable, and part of the formal scholarly record. And we think that that's a really good thing. So we didn't do this by ourselves. We had a working group which was made up of members of the Crossref community. So Publons, which is a database which where people can go and connect the reviews that they've done to a central record. Publishers like PeerJ, F1000 Research, eLife, and then other outlets like Nature Communications. They all advised us in terms of the information that we should collect related to peer reviews, and just the interest in being able to assign identifiers to these types of research outputs. To take a step back, at Crossref, we would see this forming, helping to form the bigger picture of the research. As you know, research doesn't exist in isolation, and an article itself doesn't tell the full story of the research. So in time, we want to be able to make sure that we help our members be able to link metadata related to the published article, to the data and the software potentially that have been used to do the research, related conference papers, preprints, and, as I said, the published peer reviews, so that anyone looking and interested in the research can get transparency into the research process, and it will help them potentially reproduce the research if they need to do so as part of their own work. So the previous presenters were talking about open access and how to make sure that that work is open to other people so that they can reuse it. And I think that's something that that helps the scholarly ecosystem. So this is where we want to get to, but we know that it will take some time. So let me walk through some examples of what our members are doing in terms of registering reviews. In my first example, so this is a paper from eLife, which, as I said, they were part of the group who informed our work on peer reviews in the first instance. And they were always very keen to have a transparent review process. So I can see if I go to an eLife manuscript and the DOI is in the presentation, I can then go down to the decision letter and I can see the decision that the editor made on the paper. I can see their providing transparency into the review process. and a DOI has been allocated to that piece of work. Again, those of you who are editors know that it's hard work and that you don't really get a lot of reward for it based on the amount of time that it takes you. So it's useful to have that recognised. The other piece is the author's response. And I always find this interesting too. So the author's response gets a DOI and they have the chance to respond publicly to the reviewers and to reply to instances where they addressed the reviewer comments, what they added to their paper based on that. And also, there are often occasions where an author will decide maybe not to add something to the paper, even if the reviewer recommended that. But here they can explain why they did so and have that on the public record. My next example is from Copernicus, and it's a paper about rift landslides. And again, there's a DOI for the paper. And in this case, I have, rather than the full decision letter, I can see specific reviewer comments. And there's a DOI attached to the reviewer comments again, so these can be cited. And in this instance, the main thing that the reviewer is asking for is some consistency in the figures so that it's clearer for those who are reading the final article to be able to understand those. And then the third example is from PeerJ. And again, there I've got the paper, and then I can jump down to the reviewer comments. And the reason that I highlight this example is because there's a specific section where it's telling me how I can cite the review using the DOI. And I think that's really helpful to make sure that it's clear for anyone that the review has a DOI and that it can be cited as well, because I think that elevates the review to something that can be recognized as something that's citable, rather than just, you know, unpaid work or a comment that someone has put with an article. When I was thinking about this paper, it was really useful because there was a recent article published, a recent blog published by Wiley, where one of their editors, Richard Donnelly, had been working on a journal, and they decided that they would trial a completely open peer review process. So the reviewers can make would publish all of their reviews openly when they reviewed for the journal. And the editor, Richard, made the point that he felt that transparent peer review is a great way to showcase the journal and the quality of the peer review process. So, you know, if you're an editor and you feel that the review process is something that is a real strength of your journal, then that can be something to promote to potential authors. You can show them that the rigor of the review process, which can help provide a distinction potentially between your journal and other journals. So I think that's a really good point. I would also note on some of the earlier examples that I've shown, there was no requirement to put the reviewer's name in the review process, though that is possible, but just opening up the review itself, I think, helps with the transparency of the process without the reviewer having to show who they are. So, and I'd want to acknowledge that in previous presentations where there's been talk about open peer review, the editor of the Wiley Journal that I just talked about, he said that some of their authors said that they would wish to refer to unpublished data to address a reviewer's concerns, but then they don't want to include it in the response because they want to use the data for a future publication. So you can see that there are some concerns about what to make open and what not to, and what might suffer in an open review process. I think the other concerns that I've heard are people may be wary of criticizing someone's work if they're a well-known academic in their field. So if you have an open review process, will you only get comments from people who are prepared to praise the work or make small comments, rather than provide potentially a more a review that would be more negative if they knew that it wasn't going to be shared publicly? And I think that's something as a community we have to be aware of, and you can use your judgment as an editor as well. Again, I think different subject areas and different communities will be more amenable to this than others. Those of you who are familiar with ORCID and ORCID IDs, they also have a section on peer reviews. So if you have an ORCID record, you can add your peer reviews to the ORCID record, and having DOIs and metadata for the reviews can help to do this. But again, having an ORCID record with your publications, with the reviews that you've done, just helps build out a wider and a more complete picture of the part that you play in the research process. So I think it's not just Crossref doing this; it's other pieces of infrastructure that should help recognise and reward institutions and researchers. I'm going to look at a little bit in depth in some areas. The first part is that at Crossref, it's not just DOIs. We also collect metadata specific to publications and in a specific format, so that those can be compared over time and across different publishers. Things that we collect related to peer reviews are the contributor, so who the reviewer was and what their role was, the title of the review date, the institution of the reviewer, if they have a competing interest statement, license information on the review, so again, important on how it can be reused, the article, book, or data set that the peer review is related to. You can include the recommendation itself, language, type. So very few of these fields are required, but you can see that that journals and other peer review software, they have a choice in terms of how extensive the information they want to provide and want to register with Crossref is. But we tried to be comprehensive in the volume of information that they could provide, so that they can choose what's the right fit for them. As I said, there are some specifics to registering the information. So you have to use our metadata schema, so our specific format, to provide the information. You need to provide relationship metadata that links the review to what it is reviewing, so that we're creating that map of the scholarly record. A peer review is treated as one item, and it's not part part of our Crossmark service, which indicates corrections or retractions or other updates to a piece of work. In terms of peer reviews registered, this is a query of our API. I did this maybe 2 weeks ago to look at the number of Crossref members who were registering peer reviews with us. So at the moment, there are 18 organisations registering peer reviews, and you will see that some of the names look familiar because these are the people who advised us in the first place. Wiley has registered the most peer reviews, which makes sense because they were the example that I gave about trialling open peer review. eLife and Copernicus were other examples. So you can see that there are a substantial number of peer reviews that have been registered already. And I think those will continue to grow strongly over time. It started slowly and then grew from there. And the count at the bottom is the number of peer reviews that have now been registered with Crossref, so over 100,000. So that's 100,000 reviewers who are getting recognised for those for that work. So the other thing that that we've done recently, and maybe this will seem a bit strange to you, but towards the end of 2020, we added the ability to register peer reviews for preprints and for other content types. Initially, they were just, you could only register preprints for articles. Obviously, people are peer reviewing books. And as I said, maybe it seems strange that, that you would have peer reviews for preprints, because traditionally they're seen as content that's posted before an article goes through the review process. But we had requests from our members in terms of wanting to provide open comments and reviews on preprints that could then be taken through into the peer review process. And we also have what are called overlay journals. So journals that build on content that's hosted on and selected based on content that's hosted on preprint servers. So having the reviews there means that the work can be done ahead of time, and that people can see comments and questions on peer reviews to help give them context, and to provide more information, and potentially flag up concerns with preprints, which I know has been an area that lots of people have expressed concerns about during the COVID-19 pandemic. It said, if this is something that's of interest to you, then we can, if there are other things that you think should be included in our support for peer reviews, then do let us know. I said, I think the final remarks that that we have, this one is from Stephanie Dawson at Science Open. And she said that the reason that they started to register, they started to work with peer reviews, is that they believed in rewarding reviewers by assigning Crossref DOIs to their open reviews to make them citable objects. So the people that they worked were happy that these reviews can be assigned a DOI for more accountability and transparency in scholarly publishing. And that's really the last thing that I wanted to say. I wanted to make sure that that we have lots of time for questions, and also maybe you have time for a quick break before the next presentation. Again, thank you for the invitation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rachel. This is a very interesting topic. The first question that came up into my mind when reading your presentation was specifically about preference. It seems weird, but it's actually very common to have this post-publication peer review, which is also one type of peer review that is used in journals. So I guess it's very important to have these comments in order to improve the work, the preprint that has been published, especially in order to make a newer version of the work, an improved version of the work. And the good things are that when you have the rapid dissemination of the work, as the experience, for instance, ArchiveX or other preprint systems that have been around for 3 decades, it's very good in order to communicate these results to other scientists and get feedback, important feedback in order to improve the work, and also to replicate the results and see whether you can get a more robust article in order to present better results or improve the methodology or something that can be done before submitting the work to a peer review journal. I guess it's important this dissemination, rapid dissemination, rather than the long process of the peer review in journals that takes many months. And you know that most papers get rejected. So this is a problem, because also we have this files drawer effect that non-significant results are not published, and it's also a big issue concerning the results that are not published in Science. So I guess the whole point in making this peer review as publications is to do this process more transparent, which is the right path, the right direction that journals must take in order to prove that they're doing things correctly. As you know, I give the example with the governments. If they are more transparent with people, so we trust governments more. So this is the same situation that could be applied for journals. So and the work that we do. So one of my questions is, since we know that journals editors have the last word, you know, the last decision concerning the publication of the article, I'm not sure whether the peer reviews done by the peer reviewers from rejected papers are published. This is one of my first questions that came up into my mind, whether these peer reviews are as well published as the ones for the published articles in these journals.
No, it's a good question, and I think, sorry, the sound is coming in and out a little, but I think your question was about reviews. So I guess two things. The editor's decision, and how that might differ from the reviews that are on an article. I work as I've been an associate editor, and I've been a reviewer on a journal, and the editor will always copy the reviewers on the decision letter to the author, so it will explain her interpretation of our reviews and how that translates into the work that they would like the author to do. or not, you know, explaining why the paper has been rejected. And I think potentially sometimes making sure that the reviewer comments are in a tone that's appropriate for the journal. So I always find that helpful, but I think that there are arguments. So even though we say peer reviews, you can see in the eLife example, what was published wasn't the individual reviews, but it was the editor's decision letter, so that you're getting the reviews in context, and it's explaining why the editor is choosing to ask the reviewer to make comments, or the author to make specific changes or not. So I think that's helpful, and I think that's potentially a good approach, because I know that sometimes the reviewers can get frustrated or annoyed if they feel that their review comments haven't been listened to, especially in instances where maybe they would choose to reject the article, or vice versa, one that they would choose to accept that doesn't get published. Certainly, I have been to, your other point was about manuscripts being rejected, and what to do with the reviews around those. And again, I've been in conversations with researchers when we've been talking about either journals that either posting preprints to preprint servers that do reviews, or to journals like 1000 Research, where there's an open review process. So you post your paper, when the reviews come in, they're posted on the website, and the whole review process happens in a way that's visible to the community. And I know that what that's doing is it's trying to provide transparency, but I know as well that some early career researchers would be nervous about submitting to that journal, because having their paper rejected publicly would have negative impacts on their career. The other thing that I wonder about reviews for articles that end up being rejected are that, that if you have your paper rejected, so maybe you try for, one of those, like a really, like one of the very top journals, they are so selective, and you get your paper rejected, maybe with some comments. Then what you tend to do is, try the next journal down in that field, or try another journal. And I feel like often it might be the same reviewers who could be invited to review later on in the process. So I wonder if part of making some peer review information openly available could help it travel with the manuscript, so that by the time maybe it reaches the second journal, there's already some context there. Maybe not for other reviewers to see to inform their decisions, but maybe for the editor to see that, okay, it was rejected, here were some comments, and maybe those comments were, this paper would be more suited to this other more specialist journal. So I worry about the amount of work that scientists are having to do to review manuscripts that have already been reviewed, and maybe in future there'll be a way to make the process more efficient. But no one wants to have their paper rejected, and I think that we have to be careful about the biases that open peer review might bring in.
Yes, that you are completely right about this potential biases. I wonder what has been the experience. Of these journals, eLife, Wiley, concerning this implementation of of the publication of peer reviews, because I guess they have been learning through the process. Can you tell us about something? Can you share us about their experience?
Yeah, so I think that I think that so thinking about eLife, they're quite a new journal, and they deliberately positioned themselves to, they deliberately positioned themselves to want to take in really, to be quite selective about the research that they wanted to collect and publish. But part of that as well is that they were funded by a number of high profile funders with an open agenda, and that's why eLife launched. So again, I feel like a lot of the funders, like those that are supporting Plan S, want the research ecosystem to move to being as open as possible. So I feel like with eLife, it wasn't even like a conscious decision that they had to make. It was just something that was built into how they wanted to operate as a journal. And I think they also have a slightly unique peer review process where the whole editorial team meets and discusses a paper, rather than it being the more traditional peer review that I've experienced, where you get sent a manuscript and you review it in isolation. But I think the Wiley example is interesting, um, in that they're trialing it. They're trialing the review process with a small set of their journals. So it's not something that they're just saying, yeah, let's do this for all Wiley journals. So they've done it, they've decided to do the process for a publication where obviously they have editor engagement, and they've had interest by the community in terms of making the review process openly available. And I think that's key. I think if researchers and editors feel like it's being forced on them to do open review, then it won't work. Or if we don't think carefully enough about how it could impact early career researchers. So I think they would say that their experiences have been positive. I think the example that I pointed to was about, I think I think they feel that it's also it's provided some education potentially for newer researchers to see the kind of standard of reviews that those journals would expect, which I think is helpful. But as I said, on the negative side, they have seen some reluctance from authors in potentially sharing research data, and potentially and also some reluctance, I think, by maybe by researchers to use those journals. And also, if you're going to be one of the reviewers on the work, and that's going to be posted publicly, again, I wonder how that will then impact on the people who are prepared to do the reviews. So I think it's something that they've both thought about carefully, and are doing it on journals that are a good fit for this process. But like a lot of people on the seminar, I'm sure we'd all welcome some more research into this, so that we can make sure that it's a good fit for the research ecosystem.
Yes, it's important to notice as well that, as you mentioned, the sharing this reviewers' comments to other journals. Let's say that the article was rejected by the journal, so it could impose a challenge for the author to get the work published in other journals, since the peer review is published and available for other journals. It will make some trouble, I guess, but I'm not sure whether the right publish and perish schema that funders or the government is implementing with researchers is in that way that you have to get published. Otherwise, they won't give you, or they won't continue giving you the grant to continue the research and so on. So that will impose a challenge for the researchers. But I guess they have lost sight concerning the preprints, because since it's easier that you get published, that your preprint get published easily and rapidly. So I guess it might count as well as part of the publication process of any paper. You know that most works have methodological issues that must be improved through revisions and a careful design of the study, if the study has been done already. So there might be something that you can present as results. But anyway, the feedback is really important to make the work more refined, out of errors that are unintended sometimes by the researcher, that are part of the research process, and they are normal, that they occur in any kind of study. So, but I guess that might be the experience that must be taken by journals to know what will happen if the peer reviews are available for all of us. I guess it's the right path, and there might be some reluctance from authors, but I guess it might be important to have some talks with the funders, the government who is providing these grants, in order to change their policy concerning this publish and perish situation that we have in most countries. So, and even in Latin America, they are requiring to publish in top journals, top worldwide journals with high impact factor. That, as you know, in open access, we don't agree with that kind of metrics, but I guess it's important to know that there must be other work done by all of us, researchers, institutions, Crossref, DOAG, Creative Commons, and all of us, in order to make these changes in the publication domain. So I guess it's a good idea to start with this kind of experiments. I guess it will go in some direction, and we will learn from this process. I have one question, because you know that you usually implement a very strict schema for metadata. My question is whether these journals that have implemented this peer review publishing have some kind of standard format in order to publish the results. Because you know, you can have something in the PDF or in the HTML file compared to the metadata that you send to Crossref. So do they agree to some kind of format in order to publish these peer reviews?
So we have some standard fields, but we've made very few of those metadata fields required for peer reviews, mainly because, as you say, I think a community of practice is growing around this. So to be very restrictive or to demand, you know, to demand a lot of information regarding each peer review we thought that would be too restrictive at the outset. And I think especially, with, journals, we try to capture enough information so that an article can be cited accurately. But in the preprint metadata, one of the fields, or the peer review metadata, we do ask that the peer review is linked to the article that it refers to. So you've got the information there, and the peer review metadata itself can be quite, maybe light isn't the right word, but you don't need to have too much information to register a peer review with Crossref, because we don't want to make it too much of a burden, and requiring too much information is going to be restrictive at this point. But if we see that we're re-establishing a metadata working group this year, and this is the kind of thing that they love to talk about. So we improved the peer review preprint metadata because the community wanted it. So that's not to say that we wouldn't improve or make more fields required in peer review metadata over time, but we're trying to keep it quite easy at the moment and letting the community decide what fields are most useful to them in their publications.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Let's continue with the questions from the public. Let's read these questions here. We have some questions. Yeah, there are some questions here. Okay, so there
used to be better.
Yeah. Okay, I will ask the question, translate the question because it's in Spanish.
Yes, I'm just bringing up the chat window.
Yes, the question is the questions are in the chat, but some of them are in Spanish. So there is one question: is there a conflict between the blind peer review and the anonymous publication of peer reviews, for instance, in Publance? Oh, Rachel has left. I don't know where she is. Let's wait a bit until she returns to the conference. Let's wait a bit. Oh yeah, there she is. There you are.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we lost you. Yes, there is one question from one editor-in-chief. He's asking concerning the conflict between the blind peer review, whether there is a conflict between the blind peer review and the and the publishing of anonymous peer reviews, for instance, in Publance. We cannot hear you, Rachel. Maybe you can
And another.
turn off the, yes, yeah. Maybe you can turn off the video and let's answer the question. The question was
Yes.
concerning the conflict between the blind peer review and the publication of this peer review, anonymous peer review, for instance, in Publins.
No, I think that is potentially a concern, and I think that is something that I think it is something that Publons are looking into because of concerns by the community. There was another, I can't remember exactly the name, but there was also another platform like Publons where people could go on and raise concerns about manuscripts and make comments on those. And I know that there were some instances on that as well where people thought that people weren't acting in good faith and that they were providing negative reviews based on a conflict of interest. I've seen that happen in a normal peer review process as well, and people coming in with conflicts of interest. I guess there's the argument that having that, having that public might be an opportunity for the author to respond to that rather than it happening kind of behind closed doors in a conversation with the editor. But the other side is that I think it is something that, for example, COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, and Publons and other outlets that do that, in a way, it's kind of a new area of publication ethics, and we need to figure out how to deal with that effectively as a community. Because I think if you are, say, Publons and you're committing to hosting that information, then you can't just say, oh, well, hard luck. I think that you need to engage in those conversations and figure out how to stop potential disputes between authors having a negative effect on someone's career just due to a grudge or another conflict of interest. So those things are always difficult to work through, whether they happen in the open or in a closed review process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I guess that there must be an implementation of some ethical guidelines in order to write this sensitive comments from the reviewer side or from the author side in order to make it to make a good feedback and improvement of the work rather than just criticisms of other researchers' work just for the sake of or just for the purpose of criticizing. Sometimes and the reviews end up like this. So I guess should be implemented something.
Yeah.
Well, there is another interesting question here. Since this is an editor-in-chief of a journal in Latin America. He questions, well, that they have been implementing the double-blind peer review, guaranteeing the anonymous reviews in there. So whether there are some disadvantages or drawbacks concerning the process when the journal implements this publication of these peer reviews. Do you see any drawbacks or disadvantages for the, let's say, the more rigorous type of peer review that usually academic databases recommend?
Well, I think that you can still. I think that, as you said, you can still have a double-blind peer review process, and then publish then publish the reviews. And I think certain communities, and I know that certain subject areas, double blind is the accepted practice. And I think it's a case of gauging like what your community and what your researchers what they're going to feel comfortable with. And I think, as an editor-in-chief, that communicating with researchers and reviewers is the part of your job that takes up a lot of the time and effort. So I don't think that having a double-blind review process should necessarily stop you publishing maybe reviews or a decision letter or an author's response alongside the manuscript. Because if you're doing a rigorous review process, then I think that's a useful thing to be able to share with. I think that's a useful thing to be able to share with the world and show that your journal's doing a good job. But I think you could decide, for example, you don't have to publish the reviewer's name. You could publish the decision letter and not need to include that. So I think you can gauge what feels like a good fit for your authors and your researchers. So on one of the journals that I review for, I have the opportunity on the review form to include my name if I'm happy for that to be shared with the researcher. So I can decide if after the review process, I'm happy to share that. So it's happening after the review process. And if I choose that I don't want to do so, then I don't. So that's kind of a good gauge for the journal in terms of people's comfort with open review, I think, on both sides.
Yeah, well, I guess the only drawback, let's say that you are a very strict peer reviewer, the only drawback is that you might, and if your journal publish your reviewer comments, you won't be able to add this into your academic record because they have to keep it anonymously. So I guess that will be the only drawback. But I guess the benefits are more compared to the drawbacks. There is another question here. It's in English. I understand well the ecosystem of open peer review and implementation and the implications it can have for new researchers. However, the role of preprints can help start the process of education and experience for new researchers. What do you think about preprints in this review ecosystem?
I think that in a lot of the communities I work in, like the growth in preprints, and I'm sure you've seen this in different communities as well. Like the growth of preprints has been massive in the last few years. In terms of the review ecosystem, I know that there are things like journal clubs and preprint review clubs within, for example, groups of scientists, and they'll meet up maybe once a month and they'll review, as a group, they will review some preprints as a group, which can then help educate new researchers in terms of what would be expected from the review process, train them up to potentially see errors. Humberto, as you mentioned, sometimes it can just be something small that the author has missed. So I think that within the ecosystem, I think preprints can provide really valuable training and education for new researchers. And it's a safe place to do so, rather than potentially only seeing the finished article. And again, I think it will then educate them in preprints as well, because a lot of funders are starting to require that researchers post preprints, but without kind of a working knowledge of what preprints are, some researchers can find that quite frightening because it would be the first time that they are posting their work publicly, which is always quite a scary thing to do.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I guess this has been a very useful presentation for all of us. It's, as you mentioned, very new. It's a very interesting experience, and we hope to see more journals from Latin America to participate as well in this process of learning and sharing their experience concerning this the publication of peer reviews. So thank you, Rachel. Do you want to add something else?
No, I just wanted to say again, thank you for the invitation and for the engagement and the great questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you to you to be in the conference. So take care, and we will continue with a short break because I don't know whether Clara is already here. So let's have a short break, and in the meantime you can grab some coffee or something, and let's wait until Clara Armengou is here. Just to mention that the following presentation is in Spanish, so we apologize to the English speakers attendees who are here that you will hear only the presentation in Spanish. Yeah, so you can watch the presentation in English language with subtitles afterwards on YouTube. We will provide the link. So thank you, and we will wait a bit until Clara is connected. So we will come back in a while. Thank you, Clara, for presenting at the conference. Clara holds a bachelor's and master's degree in translation and interpreting from Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, Spain. She also studied translation and interpreting at University of Surrey in Guildford, United Kingdom. Clara has 10 years of experience in the scholarly publishing industry. She worked for 4 years at Cambridge University Press as departmental administrator, open access project manager, and business analyst. Currently, she works in science dissemination as a freelancer at University Pompeu Fabra, Barcelona. Clara joined DOAJ as a project and communication manager since 2016. She is responsible for its development, communication with publishers, communities, librarians, researchers, and associated industries. Clara currently lives in Barcelona, Spain. She has joined us to present the topic about transparency and best publishing practices. Please welcome Clara. Hi. Thank you for introducing me. I'm very happy to join you all at the conference. It seems that Murphy's Law reigns. I don't know why the presentation is not loading right now. I had it ready for more than 1 hour. I apologize for this issue. I'm not sure whether you, Humberto, can share the presentation and show the slides. I'm not sure if you can share and show the slides. I'm not able to show them. My computer is frozen. I'm not sure whether you will be able to hear me. Okay, I've got the question. Oh, the presentation is working. It seems the computer is working, thanks. I can see that it's working, thanks. As Humberto mentioned, I work at the OAJ since 2016. I started working as project and communication manager. I'm currently working on many other projects. I've updated my role. I'm currently the project manager. Before covering the transparency principles and best publishing practices, I would like to talk about the DOAJ mission. Our mission is to increase the visibility, accessibility, reputation, usage and impact of quality, peer review, open access, scholarly research journals globally. This is regardless of the discipline, geography, and language. There are no barriers. Therefore, our mission, one of our goals, is to boost the reputation of open access journals in countries which the English language is not the mother tongue. We are signatories of the Helsinki's Declaration that promotes international research. Multilingualism keeps alive the research that is relevant locally. Also, the dissemination of research results in its own language must be protected and has a big impact. At DOJ, we have many projects to try to include many journals from different parts of the world. As you probably know, we have a project about DOAJ ambassadors in Latin America and others in different parts of the world. Concerning Latin America, we have carried out lots of work. We have done the same in Asia, Central and North Africa. As you know, our mission is also to work with editors-in-chief, journal owners, and help them to understand the benefits of best publishing practices and standards, and applies those to their own operations. DOAJ is fully independent. It's owned by a community interest company. It's registered in the United Kingdom. DOAJ cannot be sold, cannot be bought, it's non-for-profit. DOAJ is financially supported by voluntary donations. Most of them, around 80%, come from public institutions. The rest, around 20%, come from scholarly publishers. Lately, we have been integrating our services into discovery catalogs. Library catalogs or metadata are distributed in all discovery catalog services, in all disciplines, languages, and continents. They appear in almost all library portals, as well as Web of Science, Scopus, Primos, Summons, EBSCO, etc. The usage and distribution of metadata is free of charge. The reuse is fully open access. We have 5 different data formats: CSV files, full data dumps, OAI PMH, RSS feeds, and through our API. We have detailed documentation about these data formats in our website. Next, we find the benefits of sending an application form to DOAJ. Let's see. The main benefits to apply to DOAJ is that the journal will be recognized as
high quality.
Tiene un reconocimiento de publicaciones de calidad. Nosotros
The application form contains
tenemos
around
unas
50
50 preguntas en
questions
nuestra application form,
assuring
solicitud,
the
y
quality
esto
assessment
garantiza la
of the
calidad
journal.
de la revista.
Once
Si-
the journal is indexed
si estás
in
indexado en
DOJ, there are
pues
more
también la revista tiene un
readers,
aumento de lectores,
higher
mayor
impact to
impacto
the
para la
journal,
revista,
journal
promoción de la
promotion,
revista,
and
e
integration of
integración en
services
servicios como
such as
Primo,
Primo, Serial Solutions,
etcétera, y
EBSCO,
aumento de
etc.
tráfico y aumento de
In addition, there is an
envíos y
increase
artículos
of
publicados.
traffic into the journal, more
Además de
submissions,
esto,
and published
algunos
articles.
países,
In addition, some
y
countries
algunas
and important
grandes
funders
instituciones financiadoras
are establishing that DOJ is the new standard on
haciendo
getting
que DOJ
support
sea un
from
estándar
public
para
funds.
recibir apoyo de fondos
I can
públicos. Por
speak on
ejemplo, yo
behalf
hablo
of
por
Spain.
España, pues
For
sabemos que
instance,
la
when
CECID,
journals
que es una
apply
de
to
las
SECID, the
fundaciones de ciencia y
Spanish Chamber of
tecnología,
Commerce,
em,
that is one of the
si
founders
la
in
revista
science
está
and
indexada
technology,
en DOJ, pues,
there are
da más
higher
puntos
odds of
para
getting public
poderse
funds
financiar de
if the
manera
journal is
pública.
indexed in DOJ. DOJ has
DOJ
become
ha ido
lately
aumentando
more
de
popular,
popularidad en los últimos años.
as you can
Como
see in
veis
the
en el
graph
gráfico, pues lo acabo de
that
poner
I
aquí.
showed to you. In the last year, 2020, we had more than 12 million unique visits to the site.
Visitas únicas a nuestra página.
It means a lot of visits. In 2014, we were below 5 million. In 5-6 years, we have tripled the number of visits. This is also due to the change of indexation criteria in 2016. We required the journals included in the directory to reapply based on new criteria. We also deleted many journals that couldn't comply with the criteria. This change resulted in more visibility to DOJ and has been increasing since then. As you can see, the visibility growth is not so steep as it was in between 2016 and 2018 when we finished this process. I have contextualized what we do, our mission, the benefits of being included in DOJ, and its popularity. I shall continue with the transparency principles and best publishing practices. DOJ, in association with the Committee on Publication Ethics and Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association, created 16 principles of best scholarly publishing practices. These principles do not exclusively apply to open access scholarly publishing practices. DOJ obviously fall into the open access domain. These 16 principles were written in cooperation with these institutions. Besides these principles, DOJ has basic criteria for indexation that are in consonance with these principles. However, there might be other criteria that we added. Concerning the transparency principles, I will explain each of them and what they mean. Let me show you the presentation since I've lost it. I don't have the presentation at the moment. I've lost the website for some reason. Please give me a moment. I apologize. I can see the presentation, Humberto. I can see it, It has loaded. I apologize. My internet connection is a bit slow today. There are 16 transparency principles. One of them is that the journal has a website. The journal website and its content will prove that it has been prepared diligently, assuring high ethical and professional standards. It shouldn't contain information that could confuse the readers or authors. Moreover, the journal website shouldn't attempt to imitate the website of another journal nor publisher. The website should include a declaration of aims and scope, and the aims should be clearly defined. In addition, there should be a declaration of the submission guidelines in order to accept manuscripts from publication. For instance, the authorship criteria, the ISSN must be clearly shown, and separately the printed and electronic one. This is only applicable if the journal is published in printed and online formats. Nowadays, many journals have stopped requesting the printed ISSN. It's very important that the journal's name is unique. It shouldn't get confused with another journal's name or create confusions. At DOAJ, we request that the journal's ISSN has been registered through the International ISSN Center. The journal must be a peer review process, must have a peer review process. This is very important. The journal description should clearly state whether the submissions are peer review or not. If the journal is not peer reviewed, DOAJ wouldn't accept it in the directory. I assume that you all know about the peer review process. There is plenty of information about it. I don't want to go deeper into this particular topic. There should be clearly stated the ownership and management of the journal. They should be included in the journal's website. The editors-in-chief cannot use institutions, neither journals names that could lead to confusions. This is very important since sometimes there are questionable journals that are launched and pretend to trick the authors about the published content. A journal should have an editorial board or governing body whose members are experts on fields within the journal scope. It has happened the journal scope is too broad and they have editorial board members who are not experts in those areas within their journal scope. At DOAJ, we believe that journals should have a narrower scope and have experts on those fields within the journal scope. Journals should have contact details, provide full names and institutional affiliations of editors-in-chief, editorial board members, and other editorial staff. Regarding copyright and licensing, the copyright policy should be clearly stated in the submission guidelines. The copyright holder should be mentioned in the published manuscripts. Likewise, the licensing policy should be included in the submission guidelines and clearly stated. The licensing terms should be also mentioned in the published manuscripts, regardless of the published format, HTML, PDF, or others. If the publisher decides to publish the work with a Creative Commons license, very popular among open access journals indexed in DOAJ, the journal has to mention that it's licensing the works with this type of license. Author fees, any type of author fees, they're also known as article processing charges or APCs, publication charges, pay charges, any fees required to process the manuscript or related publication materials should be clearly stated in the journal's website. The author's fees must be clearly stated, although the publisher states that there is an author fees waiver in the current year. It must be explained and included in the submission guidelines as well as in the journal's website. Other principle relates to the process to identify and deal with allegations of research misconduct. It must be clear as well. Publishers and editors-in-chief should take reasonable measures to identify and avoid publishing works in which research misconduct has occurred. For instance, plagiarism, citations have been manipulated, data falsification, fabrication, among others. In no case shall a journal and its editors-in-chief encourage the research misconduct or knowingly allow such research misconduct to take place. In the event of a journal acknowledging a litigation in research misconduct, the editors-in-chief should contact COPE or with us if it's indexed in DOAJ. Publication ethics is related to the previous principle. Every journal should have an editorial ethics policy, and it should be clearly stated in its website. For instance, the authorship policy, how the journal handles appeals and complaints, conflicts of interest policy, policy about data sharing and reproducibility, intellectual property policy, as Tom mentioned in the previous conference. We must bear in mind the journal's publishing schedule. Nowadays, journals can be published continuously, make some issues per year. However, it should be clearly stated in the journal's website. For DOAJ, this principle is very important since some journals have stopped publishing based on their periodicity. For DOAJ, it's an alert that the journal might have stopped publishing at all, or the publisher doesn't meet the criteria stated in the journal's website. For DOAJ, this evidence could lead to the withdrawal of the journal from the directory. The journal's contact access should be indicated in such way that the manuscripts in journals is available for readers. Concerning subscription-based journals, DOAJ doesn't index this type of journals since they don't fit into our criteria. However, the access to the content should be clearly stated. Archiving should be also clearly stated. In the journal's plan for the electronic version, it must be mentioned the digital preservation and content accessibility. For instance, access to the main manuscripts through clock systems, PubMed Central, and others. If the journal is not published anymore, these archives will be live. Additional journals must mention the revenue sources or business models. If an open access journal has a business model, for instance, using article processing charges, it must be clearly stated. For instance, author fees, subscriptions, advertising, reprints, institutional support. These revenue sources should be clearly stated. It's a very important aspect of best publishing practices. The same applies for advertising and direct marketing. All marketing direct activities, including solicitation of manuscripts that are conducted on behalf of the journal, shall be indicated. In the event that DOAJ discovers or someone else finds out that a COPE's organization or the journal is a DOAJ member, and we discover that these criteria are not followed, we can remove the journal from the database. We have established a procedure to remove a journal. Besides the best publishing practices, DOAJ has additional criteria related to open access and licensing that I haven't discussed during the conference. However, you can find them on the link in the presentation. If someone requests it, I will send it. We have translated it into different languages. It's available in Spanish and English. I don't have anything more to say. I just want to add that I appreciate for attending the conference. Please ask questions since it's a difficult topic. If you have any specific questions concerning a particular aspect of the best publishing practices or the work that we do at DOAJ, I will be pleased to answer them. Thank you, Clara. My first question is the following. The battle that DOAJ has fought in Latin America, we know it as DOAJ. The battle that DOAJ has fought against the criticisms and discredit from other academic databases that have attacked DOAJ concerning the journals that were indexed in the past. We were aware that DOAJ went through the revision of the inclusion criteria and asked the journals to reapply. We wonder what exactly happened and why this concern was born among academic community that defends open access. DOAJ received very harsh criticisms. What exactly happened? What did you do to deal with these criticisms? I remember that you got them at the beginning of the last decade. If I got all what you said, since there are some audio communication issues, I think your question is related to questionable journals that were indexed in DOAJ, correct? Correcting the criticisms that DOAJ got at the beginning of the last decade related to journals that didn't meet the criteria that you presented today. It's true that DOAJ has obtained some criticisms. However, these criticisms have disappeared in the last years. These criticisms were based on lists of predatory journals. We don't employ this term. We employ the term questionable since the term is less pejorative. Those lists were created by one person who had different criteria than the ones we use. In addition, those criteria created by this person was not as objective as we believe. Based on these criticisms, in 2016, DOAJ included more questions in the application form and stricter criteria in order to accept journals into the directory. Moreover, we removed journals that didn't reapply for inclusion into the directory. Thence, it led to the removal of more than 3,000 journals in our database. We have slowly been adding journals, and we are convinced that we don't have questionable journals in the directory. Eventually, there might be a journal that becomes questionable. It changes their way of working. In this event, after being alerted about this issue, we carry out a very thorough investigation about this journal. If the journal doesn't meet the criteria, we remove it from the directory. Lately, DOAJ's reputation has improved a lot. Maybe the most important issue that we have is that we are not able to index all the content. We have some broken links due to domain migration that we were not notified. As regards the inclusion criteria, we believe that low-quality journals are not indexed. Does it answer your question? Yes, indeed. I would like to add two issues related to the criteria. The first one is that these standards or criteria in the journals cannot be reviewed automatically. I insist that to the editors-in-chief that I advise and work with, that the standards or criteria in the journals is reviewed manually. Thus, it takes lots of time, and they must wait if they are reapplying to be indexed. The second issue is that these criteria don't consider the methodological soundness of studies. I don't want to say that these standards or criteria are superficial. However, the methodological soundness of studies is also important to review. It tells a different story of the research products that journals are publishing. In addition, they reflect the quality of editorial work. For instance, if the editorial team of journals performs meticulous evaluation of the studies, careful and slow peer review process, the odds are higher on publishing high-quality research products with less errors and methodological issues compared to journals that publish articles in less time. maybe because they're just trying to meet the periodicity criteria. Journals sometimes have the incorrect publishing schedule. Editorial teams want to publish many articles, and there is no time to complete all pending tasks within the publishing schedule. It's often overlooked, and the amount of work that it represents to the editorial team. This is an important point to consider. Would you like to add something?
Para el equipo editorial. Entonces sí creo que ese es el otro punto que es importante de considerar. ¿Sí?
Indeed, this is an issue.
Sí, que es verdad que esto es un problema, pero
during the last years, DOAJ has worked on reviewing the journals indexed in their directory. If questions arise concerning some journals, for instance, their peer review process, we conduct an in-depth analysis of the journal. In-depth analysis means a team of DOJ colleagues that is exclusively focused on checking if the journal does what it claims it does. Although there are around 15,000 journals indexed in DOAJ, we continue evaluating them. We don't forget about them. It's true that it's a slow process. It's true that we have a project to improve the metadata. One aspect of this project involves an automatic process. The other aspect implies more manual processes. The aim is that in the following years we can catch up on the evaluation of all journals in the directory, assuring that no journal has not been reviewed nor updated for more than 1 year. However, there are lots of work to do. In addition, we are a small team. Despite of this fact, we work a lot. Indeed, we have noticed that DOJ has a small staff who works a lot. As you mentioned, the right path to follow is the metadata implementation and the automatization of the review process to ease your work. We are increasingly working on the automatization of processes. For instance, many years ago, maybe it seems silly, but technology has changed a lot in the past years. Several years ago, we couldn't detect whether an URL was invalid. If an editor-in-chief typed an invalid URL in the application form, the wrong URL was sent to us, and we had to search for the valid one. Currently, the application form prevents typing invalid URLs. For instance, the missing letter H in HTTP or something similar. We have been implementing these details in order to speed up the review process, although it has to be done manually. In fact, something that we have improved a lot during the last 3 years is the evaluation time towards the indexation. From the submission of the application form to the final decision to index the journal. 1.5 years ago, this process took 6 months to be completed. Nowadays, it takes less than 3 months. In most cases, the process is even faster. The 3-month evaluation is for journals in which we find issues, and we are evaluating the application form with other teams. Nevertheless, most applications in less than a month has been processed and completed. It has been a big improvement thanks to adding more staff, having faster processes in which we eventually find some bottlenecks. Indeed, I would like to add that other organizations have been working together with DOAJ. For instance, PKP, Public Knowledge Project, that develops open journal systems, Crossref, and others. These projects are outstanding. As editors-in-chief, we like a lot these projects since we observe the development, growth, and permanent improvement of these products that do our job easier as editors. The collaboration of DOJ with PKP concerning open journal systems had been very important, as well as the one we have with Crossref. We have about 50% of the journals indexed in DOJ that are using open journal systems. The fact that we have a plugin that is directly sending the article metadata to DOJ with no errors, despite of the fact that we have had to fix many errors, coding errors, etc. However, it has been a relevant progress. For instance, the API use is good. Forgive me if I have interrupted you. No apologies needed. I don't want to attack any academic database that index scholarly journals. My comment is the following. There is an academic database that exclusively accepts for inclusion journals that don't have article processing charges. I remember that among DOAJ's inclusion criteria, you allow journals that might have or not article processing charges. Obviously, the journals must have the article processing charges statement in the journal's website, especially when authors do the submission of the work. This is a very important requirement to have them stated. What do you think about it? Is it too strict to allow journals that do not have article processing charges to be indexed in this type of academic databases? This is another criterion, other standard that this academic database decided. Why not? Why not to create an academic database that don't have article processing charges? DOAJ considers that some publishers have article processing charges. It will be a pity to exclude this type of journals from the directory. We are clearly in favor of open access journals. The least article processing charges they have will be good. However, we don't believe that having article processing charges is a questionable editorial practice, neither a reason to reject their journal. We are not against someone who wants to create this type of academic database. I agree. I've mentioned this particular example because this academic database doesn't like the idea of journals having article processing charges that might ease the peer review process and publication of the article. However, I have observed the big issue in journals. How do they survive throughout time? It's an important question that I have to DOAJ. I don't remember the name of the colleague. I think it was Jeffrey Bell or other colleague. This colleague addressed the issue of the survival of open access journals throughout time. He stated that it was easier to launch an open access journal rather than maintaining it through time. One of the most worrying issues among open access publishers is the lack of funding. Editors-in-chief heavily rely on the collaboration of peer reviewers to complete the editorial workflow. Quite often, the editor-in-chief invests a lot of time and money to keep the journal project running. In addition, publishers such as universities don't have the money or no money at all to fund the journal's project. So my question is the following: what type of open access business model DOAJ recommends to adopt? We know that you have evaluated journals with open access business models in other countries. We also know that the European Union has lots of funds to support. Obviously, it varies from country to country. The European Union has lots of fund on science and technology to support scholarly journals and publishers. I concur. I have noticed 2 points in your comments. The first one relates to support the journals to survive throughout time. It's a difficult topic. However, they have helped a lot scholarly journals that are using open journal systems and open source software. Maintaining the platform is very simple. It's something that editors-in-chief can do. They don't have to worry about getting a webmaster to create the journal's website, maintaining the website. The software is open access. In fact, we have journals in the directory that are owned by big publishers. Some of them have no article processing charges, but the publishers keep them running due to their reputation and the published content. Then we have journals in the directory that belong to public institutions. In this particular example, funding the journal relies on the work of the staff to raise money for the journal. It's a complex topic. We don't have specific recommendations on this topic. Personally, I believe that important funders, whether they be European, American, Latin American, should support journals that publish studies and scientific outcomes. We don't have specific recommendations. We adhere to initiatives in which funders support open access, making available published studies and easy to find for researchers, authors, and readers.
Como eso, pues revistas donde se publican las investigaciones y la ciencia. Pues no tenemos nosotros una recomendación en concreto, pero sí que nos adherimos pues a cualquier iniciativa en la que los órganos de financiación hagan que la investigación pues sea lo más pública posible y lo más fácil posible para las revistas y para los investigadores, para los autores y evidentemente esto por nuestro lado para los lectores y los usuarios.
Since you discussed the transparency principles, I would like to go back on this topic. Editors-in-chief often think that these new criteria and principles are irrelevant. Could you explain them to us? These new criteria were not created randomly, nor based on a whim, nor based on crazy ideas after having talks with COPE or other institutions. These new criteria target specific aims. Could you please explain them to us? Okay. As I mentioned, these organizations that created the transparency principles have a long history in scholarly publishing. Based on their experience, they have concluded that the transparency principles that I mentioned are the ones that every journal should follow to achieve the best publishing practices. Nowadays, not everything is beneficial. Internet has eased the creation of scholarly journals. Not everything is allowed. For instance, meeting with research colleagues and saying, let's create a journal, and that's all. No, there are principles regarding best publishing practices that journals must follow. Otherwise, new questionable journals are created. In this example, publishing the work of colleagues who created it falls into questionable editorial practices. This is not the aim of scholarly journals. This is not the aim that we support. On the contrary, we support the 16 principles of best publishing practices. In addition, DOJ has the inclusion criteria aligned with these principles. It doesn't imply that following these principles and criteria should demotivate colleagues to create a journal. New editors-in-chief or novice editors-in-chief are very enthusiastic with the journal project However, they lack information, knowledge, and training to do the job. I want to give a short message to the editors-in-chief and editorial team members who are watching this presentation. If you get the professional advice, feedback, training, you get in touch with the OIJ, Crossref, and Creative Commons, they will reply to you. It's also a learning process. Indeed, it's a long learning process. There are 2 points that I want to discuss. The first one is that the OIJ supports the initiative Think, Check, Submit. It's very useful for novice authors and researchers in order to find where they can get published. Which journal is the best to send the manuscript? This initiative provides advice to select the journal based on the professional field. We use this initiative as training. The second point relates to the OIJ website. In November 2020, we launched the new website. Regarding the inclusion criteria to accept journals in the directory, we improved the guidelines, including examples, trying to be clearer and using less text. Besides, I'm the one in charge of the help desk, the one who deals with external emails. I'm very happy to answer any questions before and after submitting an application form. We're doing our best to reply your emails in less than a week. You have my email if you want to contact me. Thank you, Clara. Let's check the questions that attendees might have. I just see one question. Carla Flores says that they have an issue concerning a duplicated article in the OIJ due to an error updating the metadata through OpenJournal systems. In fact, I can resolve this issue. She can send me an email to feedback@doij.org. I will write it down to have a record of it. The issue happened to us in OpenJournal systems. One must select the articles that one wants their metadata to be exported into an XML file. You have the option to select all the journal articles or some of them. Mistakenly, if one selects all the articles and upload their metadata into the OIJ, having articles in the directory, they ended up duplicated. Indeed, this is an issue. Last year, I created a video with the steps to upload the metadata into the OIJ. The video is in YouTube, and I can show it here. I have to find the link. I've got other question. Do you have any plans to automatically harvest metadata from journals? I know that you have implemented the OAI PMH protocol. There are some harvest systems that are already doing it, such as Reddit. The editor-in-chief doesn't need to manually upload the metadata. They automatically harvest the metadata periodically. Do you have plans to implement it? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you clearly. I heard every other word that you said. Could you repeat the question? Okay, about the harvest system. Do you have plans to implement a harvest system using the OAI PMH protocol? We don't have implemented a harvest system. We would like to have it. However, it's very expensive to do it. We don't have the money to do it. We have done a pilot project with Plus that works. Nevertheless, we don't have the money to do it right now.
Aunque
I
estaría muy bien,
I
por
would love
ejemplo,
to do it with your
a mí
journals
me
using
encantaría que
open
todas
journal
las revistas que tenemos
systems,
en OJS, que son una
automatically
gran cantidad,
harvesting the
lo pudiéramos hacer de
metadata.
manera automática. Esto estaría muy bien.
Sí.
Sí.
I've got other question from an attendee. He asks the following. If the journal has declared a semi-annual publishing schedule, but it also publishes articles ahead of print, considered for each volume, what is the best way, as DOAJ recommends, to state this information in the journal's website?
Vale.
This is
Esto es muy
quite
fácil.
simple.
Esto se tiene que
The information must be stated
simplemente
as the
especificar
attendee
tal y
wrote it
como
in
me
the
lo ha puesto
question.
aquí en su pregunta. En las instrucciones.
It must be included in the journal's description. DOAJ has team members that check the journal in all
Nosotros tenemos
languages.
evaluadores en todos los idiomas.
If the journal
Entonces,
is
si está, las revistas
in
está
Spanish or
español
Portuguese,
o
there is no
no hay
issue.
problema. Lo vamos a entender y
We
todas las
understand the
instrucciones las
languages.
leemos de revista por revista,
We
igualmente.
read all journal descriptions, journal by
De todas
journal.
maneras,
Anyway, I will forward this question to DOAJ's the editorial team, and they can provide a more specific answer. I think that the editorial team must declare it in the publishing schedule, how they do it considering the fact that they publish ahead of print manuscripts. Would you like to add something else, Clara? I've got something else concerning the API, how it can be used by editors-in-chief.
Exactamente lo podríamos usar los editores.
I'm sorry, Humberto, I couldn't hear you. Could you repeat the question? Concerning the API, how it can be used by editors-in-chief. Could you write the question? I can hear you. I hear every second word. Okay, I texted you the question. I can see 3 questions. I have answered 2 of them. I can see your question, Humberto. Can you repeat the question? I can hear you better right now. About the API, how it can be used by the editors-in-chief. Okay, editors-in-chief can use the API for many things. They can use it to send application forms, in other words, indexation forms, when having a journal. If it's an editor with more than one journal, he can use it. If the journal employs open journal systems, the journal is using the API. The API is used to delete applications, create bulk applications, retrieve an application, submit, update, and delete article metadata.
Actualizar artículos. Muchas veces, como la pregunta anterior, tenían un problema con un artículo que se había
bringing back the previous question concerning the duplicated article, you can use the API to fix this issue. They can delete the duplicated article. Most editors-in-chief ask me to do it, thus I do it. There are other things that can be done using the API and the password. We call it using an authenticated route. The API can be also used to search information regarding articles and journals. Interesting. Besides the API, you can download all the journal metadata on a CSV file. You can download it with no charge at all and see all the journals. Then you can filter based on certain criteria. For instance, journals specialized in mathematics or published in certain countries. We also have something that we call data dump, where you can download not only the journal metadata, but also the articles one. It's a large file since it contains the metadata millions of articles. This is why you have the cascading metadata, as you mentioned it, indeed. Would you like to add something else? More questions from attendees? I've got nothing more to add. I will be very happy to answer your questions, or you can drop me an email and I can reply to you later. Okay, thank you, Clara. I think that there are no more questions. We would like to thank Clara, the other presenters, OpenCiencia team, and attendees for taking part of this international conference. Spanish-speaking attendees could hear the interpretation in the previous presentation. English-speaking attendees will be able to hear the interpretation of this last presentation. Thank you all. Our communication channels are open. We are organizing other events in the second half of the year. We would like you to attend these events. For instance, the International Conference of Peer-Reviewed Scientific Articles is taking place in August. We would like to invite you to attend this conference. This event is free of charge. We will also like that some of you could participate. Editors-in-chief who have experience in scholarly publishing could participate to share their experiences. The event is organized in 2 languages. You can present either in English or Spanish. If you present in Spanish, there will be a Spanish-English interpreter. In addition, you will be able to hear the interpreter in other English-speaking presentations. We have invited around 8,000 editors-in-chief from several countries, not only in Latin America, but also in Europe and Asia. We will be pleased to have you attending these important events that we are organizing in collaboration with other institutions. The International Conference of Peer-Reviewed Scientific Articles is organized by OpenCiencia in collaboration with Centro de Investigación sobre Desarrollo Humano y Sociedad and South Colombian University. They are also sponsoring and promoting the event. We would like you to attend the event. Thank you all, the presenters, and see you soon. Have a nice morning. Goodbye. See you soon. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Clara. See you soon. Goodbye.